Now, I heard that you are someone who warned about the Mangalore accident.
See, everybody has the fear, but the only thing is, you got to understand that when it's time to go, you have to go. I'm a firm believer in destiny. I never believe that the last day is not around the corner. So when you get into an aircraft cockpit as a pilot, you have to forget your family. What is important is
So, can we say that IAS officers were responsible for the Mangalore and Calicut accident?
at that time,
Hi, everyone. Welcome to the podcast series. First time I traveled in a flight was when I was 27 years old. So that time I still remember it was from Guwahati to Calcutta, Calcutta to Chennai. In fact, I've told every family member, extended family members, that I'm going to fly. So excited. Now, think about just I was a passenger. How about someone being a pilot? That too for 40 years. Today we have one distinguished guest who was a pilot for 40 years. Let's learn from him, hear from him how the life of a pilot is, whether he has had any emergency landings, how safe it is for us to fly in an aircraft. So, everything let us know from Captain Ranganathan. Thank you so much, sir, for joining us.
thank you.
So, which age you thought first time in your life that you want to fly?
Well, I'd been wanting to fly from a very. My father was a professor in Madras Christian College, Tambaram, and our house was on the approach path of the Tambaram Air Force Base. So, from a very young age, I'd been watching aircrafts landing and taking off. So, I always wanted to be a pilot. And I did contemplate joining the Air Force, but my father said no, because he said if you join the forces, your family life goes for a toss. So if you want to be a civilian pilot, I'll support you. And we were very fortunate that in the 60s, you had the Tamil Nadu government scholarship for pilots. And unlike the encouragement level, which is zero now, those days, if you looked at Indian Airlines or Air India, the number of pilots who came out of Madras Flying Club was very high, and we were all considered good. And so I joined Madras Flying Club when I was still in college, because the instructor there was an ex-Air Force pilot who took part in the World War II. And he was also my father's student in the college. And he told him that first let him finish his graduation and do the flying at the same time. Not rush into flying without graduation, because you never know when you could become medically unfit. So you must have something to fall back on. When I hear the number of youngsters who join at the minimum age of 17, they have the money, they're all from rich families, they have money to pay. You'll be surprised, when I did my flying, it was 10 rupees an hour. And today, and my license cost me only 5,700 rupees. Today it is, I was talking to Mr. Vijay, and I was told it is 1.5 crores. You see the parents are giving a lifetime saving to encourage a youngster to be a pilot without knowing whether he has the aptitude for flying. If you take my generation, we took to flying for the passion of flying. We never wondered about how much we were going to get. It was only that as long as I get a job to fly as a pilot, that was enough for me. I never looked at the money part. When I joined the Hindu to fly the Dakotas in 73, my first salary was 250 rupees. Today, even a peon gets more than that in any place. So I never looked at money as a thing. I wanted to be an airline pilot. I did get a job in a tea estate in Assam as an assistant manager, 2,500 rupees with a bungalow and all that. But I opted for the 250 job because I wanted to be an airline pilot. And my generation was of that thing. We never looked at money. And of course, the jobs were not that easy, but I was fortunate to get a job with Hindu. And I would say that that was the best grounding I had, because flying in weather on a Dakota, which had no instrument, now all of them start in modern aircrafts, which has ILS and all the computers and everything. We had just the basic instrument. We had to use our judgment and our eyes and our skill. So the grounding that we all had was completely different from what a modern pilot does. And if you look, I'm not saying that we were superior, but the motto of flying at that time is you fly the aircraft, don't let the aircraft fly you. Today, majority of them, they are letting the aircraft fly them. They don't fly the aircraft. That is the...
Sir, Hindu, you told. Hindu means it's a newspaper. How come you joined as a pilot there?
See, for them to distribute the papers, the printing was done in Madras, and it used to be flown to other centers for distribution by road. So if they printed and sent it in the morning, it'll never reach in time. So they had aircraft which will fly to Trichy, Madurai and Trivandrum, or Hyderabad, Vijayawada and back to Andhra. So it was all printed in Madras and flown to airports from where they distributed by road.
Okay, sir. Okay. So your first flight was with the Hindu, the Dakota.
Yeah.
How was that experience, sir?
It is totally different from the flying the modern jets. There you have to learn, like we had no weather radar, we had no instrument landing system, we had no VOR, that navigation system and all that. We had just the radio compass. So it will point to a beacon which we have to choose. And then and all our flights were by night. So we used to look for a lightning flash and see where there's a gap in the clouds, pick the gap and go. So there are times when your judgment can be, if you get your judgment right 8 out of 10 times, you should feel happy. There are times, a couple of times, we've got into thunderstorm clouds and got thrown around. But I've been lucky to survive.
Sir, the flights, whenever we travel, I personally, I always have a slight fear inside whether everything will go, whether we land safely. I always have this. How about you, sir? You've flown almost 40 years. Whether you pilots also have that fear or no, nothing. You know that it is safe only.
See, everybody has the fear, but the only thing is, you got to understand that when it's time to go, you have to go. I'm a firm believer in destiny. I never believe that the last day is not around the corner. So when you get into an aircraft cockpit as a pilot, you have to forget your family. What is important is the lives of all those who are behind you in the cabin. So you have to take them from A to B safely. That is our motto. And, that is one of the difference between airline pilot and an Air Force pilot. Because for them, it is their life, because trained fighter pilot or their life is important to fly than anything. So that is why they carry a parachute. And it is not a comfort, it is they have to develop the skill for defense. But an airline pilot has to take care of the comfort of the passengers and the safety of the passengers. So we don't carry parachutes, and we also have to make the flight as comfortable as the person who taught me flying in Dakota as well as in the Boeing. They first thing they said is the passengers sitting in the last row should feel happy you're a good pilot. Because if your control inputs are not correct or not smooth, it is the tail which keeps swinging around. And they are the ones who will feel sick or feel uncomfortable. But if the passenger sitting in the last row feels they have not felt anything, you've done a good flight. So that is very important to make your flying smooth. So you develop your skill that way.
Sir, usually when we as passengers, we say 8 o'clock flight, Chennai, Delhi. We go around, say 7:40 gates gets closed. What time you people enter the same flight? If you are a pilot, say 8 o'clock flight means what time you'll enter?
See, normally they have these duty time thing, the sign-on time. Uh, Most of the airlines abroad, your sign-on is 1 hour before for a domestic flight, and it'll be about 1.5 hours for an international flight because you have to go to the operations control, check through what is the load, number of passengers, you have the how much fuel is required. You plan for the whether the operations man has done the calculations correctly. Then for every airport, you have what they call NOTAMs, the notices to airmen. It'll say this facility is there, that facility is not there. So we have to plan based on, is it safe to go? Do I have enough fuel for the flight? What are the weather conditions en route? So what is the path I take? And is the aircraft completely serviceable? If there's any part which is not serviceable but permitted for a flight, so we have to study all the documents before we go to the airport. That is why we sign on 1 hour 15 minutes ahead and then by the time, really speaking, a captain and the pilot should be in the cockpit half an hour before minimum. I've heard of many pilots coming in after the passengers. No, they should be there to check everything, set the thing. So they should not be rushing. If you rush, your judgment goes haywire. You may miss very important points. If you have time, then you'll do things in a very relaxed manner and you will not miss. And what is most important in modern flying is there are two pilots. And it is a teamwork. Like in the old days, like if you're a captain, you're the king. And a junior co-pilot will not even open his mouth. A good airline, I think what we call the crew resource management, if somebody tells you that you've missed out something, you should not, the ego is the last thing a pilot should have. Most of the accidents happen or poor performance is because of ego. That I am the boss, who are you to tell me? When a pilot has that attitude, in my opinion, he's a very, very poor pilot.
Now, are there steerings? Because you were telling pilots, we know the path and all. I always wanted to know, are there steerings? Because car has steering. How about the flight?
See, in the modern aircrafts, we have what's called a flight management computer, which you select the route you're flying. Like you have roads, we have what's called airways. At every point, they have beacons or what they call waypoints, which is a latitude, longitude number. So this is a predetermined, it will be a zigzag path like your roads. Now my flight management computer, when I load the route, it's all pre-programmed. it'll automatically come. And once you check if it's following the selected path and you activate the computer, it'll show you. So in front of you, it'll be a magenta line, just like a road, it'll show you what it is. But the computer, see, the takeoff and landing is done manually, except in the category 3 ILS thing. Otherwise, it is all done manually. And after takeoff, you engage the autopilot and you couple the computer with that. The autopilot will follow whatever is there in the computer. You must check if the details in the data in the computer are accurate with you have a printed nav log given to you. So all this takes time. So when you say that, oh, the captain came 5 minutes before departure, I mean, they should really pull him up, because if they condone that, he's the most unprofessional pilot, because he's not thinking of the passengers behind him.
And is there a steering, sir?
It's
Manual
called.
steering?
It's not called steering. It's called a control wheel for
Okay.
a thing. But it depends. Like all the Airbuses, it's got a side stick. So you control with the side stick, And the Boeings have the control wheel. It's like a half a steering wheel. But that's only when you're manually flying. Otherwise, the autopilot controls that also.
Now, I heard that you are someone who warned about the Mangalore accident, the airport accident. Is it true, sir?
Yes.
How did you know that an accident is going to happen?
See, one, the training standards of most of the airlines are really not high in India, because there's a difference between teaching a pilot. You have to have the aptitude to teach. But unfortunately in India, the way the DGCA functions and airlines function, you become a trainer if you know someone, if you're connected. A person may not be a top class pilot, but he could be a very good instructor. So the training is very, very important. Unless your training is top class, you cannot produce a top class pilot. So when you have people who are substandard, but they are instructors or examiners because of the connection, the training is bound to suffer. And if the top man is not qualified or competent, what he is going to produce is going to be substandard. Accidents happen because of that. And in the DGCA, I'm sorry to say, I know this is a IAS association thing, but do they really know the subject? The problem is, pleasing the minister or the politicians does not make you a safe organization. What I have seen during the last 20 years, there's only one man who knew the subject or who was open to take suggestions and criticisms. All the others I've found, they don't know the subject, including the ministers, the DGCA and heads of airport authority. They only want to please the political
Sorry
class.
for intervening, sir. They means you mean to say IAS officers heading DGCA?
Yes. How many of you or how many of them will conform to what are the standards? Like if you look at, see, civil aviation is based on the International Civil Aviation Organization annexes. Now the annexes come with standards or recommended practice. That's why it's called the SAPs. And anything which is a standard shall you have the word shall as part of the rule. That makes it mandatory. But if you take any of the rules that Indian DGCA has, it'll be will, or they don't use the word shall. And if you see all the regulations in the DGCA manual, one line will be there at the end that at the discretion of the DGCA, exemptions or waivers can be granted. That is how they bypass the rules, and that's how they undercut the safety. Now take, for instance, Mangalore. The report which came out by a committee headed by an air marshal is the biggest fraud on safety. I've given presentations abroad, I've given presentations here with proof. And unfortunately, even the judges in Supreme Court were blind. They only took the word of the government and they did not look at the proof. Now, everyone said the pilot was sleeping, he touched down late, and the aircraft crashed, it caught fire, and people died. And if you read the report, it will also say that how the crash tenders reached in 3 minutes 55 seconds. That is a blatant lie, because the crash tender got bogged down just outside the airport compound. It never reached the burning aircraft, and all of them were burnt to death in their seats. So that was a criminal act, and it was a cover-up. And what caused the accident is not the pilot who slept on the flight and who touched down late. The airport had the instrument landing system, the housing. ICAO had laid down that by 1st January 2010, all structures around the runway should be frangible, so that even if an aircraft hits that, they should collapse, no damage to the aircraft. You know, in Mangalore, it was a concrete structure which was sticking out 15 feet above the surface. That aircraft wing hit that concrete structure, broke, and as it went down, fuel spilling from the fuel tanks ignited the engine. Aircraft caught fire, and rescue did not reach in time. That's why they all died. But if you see the report, there's not one mention about that concrete structure. And what is more dangerous was the minister, Praful Patel, on the day of the crash, he said, Mangalore conforms to all ICAO standards, which is a lie. And they wanted the flights to resume as early as possible. And they replaced the concrete structure with steel girders. I have photographs to prove that. And that's what I've been reporting, taking it out. So, and when you have the minister and the DG, they all want to place the minister or the politicians. The whole thing is the flight should go. It's the connectivity. At that time, we brought out how certain airports are dangerous. And there's a letter where I had even pointed out that Calicut, if somebody lands from the west on runway 10 and it's raining, and there is no safety margin there, there's going to be another fatal accident.
Even now there is a...
Yeah, the runway does not have what is called a runway and safety area. After the Calicut crash, they formed a committee which recommended, one of them is an aerodrome expert. He had said that unless you have the runway and safety area, it is not safe. The only option for them is either you extend the runway, if there is no space available, reduce the runway length, in which case big aircrafts, or you have to reduce the payload. The number of passengers who can be in that plane will be less. It's 4 years now. They have done nothing because the minister doesn't know what the subject is. The people in DGCA, the IAS officers, they keep postponing, and procrastination is, I think, it's in their blood for safety actions. That is why, though they may claim that our system is very safe, it is not. You are flying on your horoscope. That's all. Because now take, for instance, the new rule about fatigue. They're all claiming, they've done something. Now, it is not like one size fits all. You can say, I've extended the rest period from 36 hours to 48 hours, so we've done something. But a person who does the rest, if you're going to be given the rest in a hotel, where will you get the rest? If you see prior to 2005, the duty time limitation had that you do your day off in your home. Where is a family life? So there is always this stress, that they think you're a machine. After that Toronto crash of Air France, when the journalist asked the investigator, is it a pilot error? He made a fantastic statement, and I always talk about it in my presentations. His statement was, pilots are not machines, they are human. I do not look at what made this pilot do what he is not trained to do. When our training does not conform to standards, and you're treating a pilot like a machine, and don't let him have any human feelings. Like here, we don't have any, like if you talk to most of the pilots who are complaining, it's fatigue, stress. Stress is not just the body stress, it's also financial stress. Airlines cut the salary, cut the allowance, and some pretext or other. DGC has a rule that if your contract terms are not met, you can leave. But then they have a rule that you have to give 1 year notice to the company. So the whole thing is, we don't have a DGCA who's a regulator. We have only a facilitator who is hand in glove with the airlines. So as long as you have that, you don't have a regulator who's independent, not governed by the government or politicians, who can think for himself that safety is the most important thing. You're not having a safe environment in India. And the best statement, the former head of International Civil Aviation Organization, Asad Kotete, he made one statement. He said, one life lost is one life too many. So unless you have, and all these IAS officers and others, they go to ICAO on deputation. What have they learned with a spell for 3 years in Montreal? They've learned nothing about safety. Just come here, if the minister says, like you have every minister that I've seen last 20 years, he will say in the next 5 years we'll have 100 airports. We're going to have so many aircraft, so many flights, connectivity. But if you have so many airports, flights to go in, do you have air traffic controllers? We don't have. In 2006, we showed that we were 500, 600 controllers short. That number keeps increasing or decreasing. So who is going to bring the aircraft down safely? We don't have controllers. So what is the point in announcing that we're going to have 100 airports? Do we have the air traffic controllers for that? After the Mangalore crash, they had a committee formed, the DGCA at that time insisted, and it was called Civil Aviation Safety Advisory Council. I was part of that. So when we went inspecting some of the airports, we found blatant violations of safety. And talking of the radar controllers and shortage of air traffic controllers, when we did port play inspection, I found 2 ATCOs who are qualified radar controllers. That was a time when Mumbai was reporting severe shortage of radar controllers. What's the point in sending a qualified man to a station which has no radar? And I was told it is that your punishment posting that people get, you have to do your rounds on this kind of thing. So you'd rather have a shortage in a place where he should be and downgrade the safety, then so there's got to be common sense in all the actions. And because one of the biggest problems in India is that there is no accountability. Now, we work on Peter's principle. The more incompetent you are, the higher you rise. And that is, in civil aviation, is the highest.
So, can we say that IAS officers were responsible for the Mangalore and Calicut accident?
I wouldn't say IAS officers. At that time, the man who was a DGCA, in my life in civil aviation, I found him to be the most competent of the officials. All the others had, they'll start off well, but they'll slide very fast. He was one man I found who had no ego. Like if he didn't know something, he will approach a person who knows the subject. I've not come across any other DGCA who would consult. So that it's not that I have on this subject. They have absolutely no competence. The other thing I can give you, it is in our own state. The secondary runway bridge in Chennai airport. You'll all be sure. I've been taking this up from the time I did the inspection at thing. The whole thing is completely corroded. You never know when it's going to collapse. And
Chennai airport, some safety
that bridge
issues.
across the Adyar River. Okay, I had warned, even before the bridge was constructed, I had warned that if you block the path of Adyar, because in 2005 there was a lot of flooding in except the runway, the entire airport was flooded.
No, how Adyar Bridge is connected to airport?
The runway is on top of the bridge, not the Adyar bridge, the runway bridge.
Okay.
That is substandard. The environment clearance for that shows that they have to be minimum so many meters above the flood level of the earlier flood, 2005 floods. They were given specific numbers and it was cleared for a particular width. It is built wider than that. And then all the pillars, as per the environment clearance, were supposed to be 1.2 meter diameter. And the airport authority own statement says 0.85 meters. So it is built narrower. It's all cost cutting. I've got photographs of the corroded thing. They're doing patchwork with cement to cover the corroded concrete. And so I said, you have built that bridge 4 meters below the cleared height. And we had 8 months before the 2015 floods, I met the Chief Secretary and the Transport Secretary in the head office. I warned them about this. I showed them photographs of my inspection. You know what I was told? Lightning doesn't strike twice. So you're unnecessarily... 2015, whole of Chennai was practically destroyed then. The army bridge was washed away. It's all because this bridge blocked the path of the water in Adyar, and there's a dip in the runway, and the flood waters came at very high speed over there. It damaged the Coast Guard hangar and several aircrafts there. And we had floods in areas like T Nagar and all that, which has never seen floods before. Did they act on that? No. They are still condemned. Because my letter is there, where I said that the bridge is not safe. If an aircraft crash lands on that, then if loss of lives, people who cleared that have to be accountable. I don't know whether it's because of that letter or not. Even today, 12 years after the bridge was completed, heavy aircrafts don't land on that runway. And their landing point is beyond the bridge. So they know that it's not safe, but they're still using that.
Pakistan is known for some this fake pilot, this, that. But somewhere I read, sir, in fact, India is much unsafer than Pakistan because of some audits. Okay, sir, you have flown almost 40 years. Whether you would have seen many emergency situations. In fact, I think once you did it, some engine failure was there, something.
You have the aptitude to be a pilot.
Is it max and all? And you told Pakistan is having a strong judiciary, so they are much safer. Do you mean to say India judiciary is not strong?